The night I found him bleeding in my barn, I thought he was a person. Someone hurt. Someone who needed help. I never imagined that saving his life would lead to the most dangerous truth I've ever heard. A truth about Jesus Christ that the military would kill to keep secret. Before I tell you what he revealed to me, hit that subscribe button. Because once you hear what this being told me about our Savior, your faith will never be the same again. I heard the explosion around 11 p.m. Living 15 miles outside of Millbrook, Montana, you get used to strange sounds. Coyotes howling, trucks backfiring on the highway, thunder rolling across the plains. But this was different. This was a deep, resonating boom that shook the windows of my farmhouse and sent my dog Rex into a frenzy of barking. I'm Daniel Carter, and I've run this cattle ranch for 23 years, ever since my father passed and left it to me. I'm 47, divorced, and I go to First Baptist Church every Sunday without fail. My faith is the bedrock of my life, or at least it was. I grabbed my shotgun, more out of habit than fear, and stepped onto the porch. The September night was clear, stars scattered across the sky like diamonds on black velvet. But to the east, beyond the tree line near Johnson's Creek, I saw something that didn't belong. An orange glow. Pulsing. Growing. Fire, I thought immediately. Forest fire. I needed to call it in before it spread. But as I reached for my phone, I saw something fall from the sky. Not fall exactly, more like stagger through the air, trailing sparks and smoke. It moved with purpose like a wounded bird trying to stay aloft, and it crashed somewhere in the direction of my barn. Rex was going absolutely crazy now, pawing at the door, whining. I grabbed my flashlight, checked that the shotgun was loaded, and headed out into the darkness. The walk to the barn took 5 minutes, but it felt like an hour. The air smelled wrong, metallic, like ozone after lightning, mixed with something chemical I couldn't place. As I got closer, I saw scorch marks in the grass, a trail leading directly to my barn's back entrance. The door was open. I never left it open. "Hello?" I called out, my voice sounding small in the vastness of the night. "This is private property. I'm armed and I've called the sheriff." I hadn't called anyone, but they didn't need to know that. No response. Just the sound of something moving inside, something breathing, heavy, labored breaths that sounded wrong, too deep, too slow. I raised the shotgun and stepped inside. The first thing I saw was the blood, except it wasn't red. It was silvery blue, almost luminescent in the beam of my flashlight, splattered across the hay bales and dirt floor. The trail led to the far corner, behind my tractor, and that's where I found him. I say him now, but in that moment, I didn't know what I was looking at. The figure was humanoid, but clearly not human. Tall, maybe 7 feet if he could stand, with elongated limbs and skin that looked like it was made of living metal, shifting between silver and deep blue. His head was larger than a human's, with enormous eyes that caught my flashlight beam and reflected it back like a cat's. Those eyes locked onto mine, and I felt something I'd never experienced before. Not fear, exactly. Recognition. Like some deep part of my soul knew this being, had always known him. He was badly wounded. His left side was torn open, that strange blood seeping out steadily. Burns covered his chest and arms. He was dying. I could see it in the way his breathing slowed, in the dimming of his skin's luminescence. His hand, 3 long fingers and a thumb, reached toward me, not threateningly, pleading. And then he spoke, not out loud, but directly in my mind, his voice weak but clear. "Please, help me. They're coming." "Who's coming?" I whispered, lowering the shotgun slightly. "The soldiers. They cannot find me. They cannot know about the message." "What message? What are you talking about?" His eyes began to close. His breathing became more labored. "The message about your Jesus. The truth they've hidden for so long." Before I could respond, I heard it. The sound of vehicles, multiple vehicles, and they were getting closer. I had maybe 3 minutes to make a decision that would change my life forever. The sound of engines grew louder. Through the barn's open door, I could see lights sweeping across my property. Big spotlights, the kind the military uses. Rex was barking his head off back at the house. I looked down at the dying being in my barn. Every instinct I had as a Christian said to help him. Love thy neighbor. Show mercy to the stranger. But every practical bone in my body screamed that getting involved in whatever this was would destroy everything I'd built. "Please," the voice came again, weaker now. "If they take me, the truth dies with me." "What truth?" I demanded, my hands shaking on the shotgun. "Tell me what you're talking about." His enormous eyes opened again, focusing on me with an intensity that made my breath catch. "Your Savior, Jesus Christ. We were there. We witnessed it all. And what they've taught you is only half the story." The vehicles were close now, maybe a minute away. I could hear shouting, orders being barked. They were coordinating a search pattern. Later, I'd wonder what made me do it. Maybe it was the desperation in his telepathic voice. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe God himself was guiding my hand. But in that moment, I made a choice. "Can you move?" I asked. "Barely." "Then we need to move now." Fast. I slung the shotgun over my shoulder and grabbed his arm. It was cold, like touching metal that had been left outside in winter, but I could feel something like a pulse beneath the surface. Together, we stumbled toward the back of the barn. My property sits on old land, part of a homestead that dates back to the 1800s, and like many old Montana ranches, it has something most modern properties don't. A root cellar. Not the kind in your basement. This was a separate structure, built into a hillside, designed to store food through harsh winters. My grandfather had reinforced it during the Cold War, convinced the Russians were coming. I'd kept it maintained mostly out of respect for his memory. Never thought I'd actually need it. The entrance was covered by an old wooden door, camouflaged with overgrown grass and weeds. I kicked it open, revealing stone steps leading down into darkness. "Down," I told the being. "Now." He didn't argue. We half climbed, half fell down the steps into the musty darkness. I pulled the door closed behind us just as I heard vehicles screech to a halt outside my barn. The cellar was pitch black. I fumbled for the battery-powered lantern I kept down here and flicked it on. The weak yellow light revealed a space about 12 feet square, with stone walls and a dirt floor. Shelves lined the walls, still holding dusty jars of preserves my grandmother had canned decades ago. The being collapsed against the far wall, his luminescence dimming to almost nothing. That strange silver-blue blood was pooling beneath him. You need medical attention, I said, knowing how absurd that sounded. What was I going to do? Call Dr. Brennan in town? Hey, Doc. I've got an alien bleeding out in my root cellar. Can you make a house call? No. Human medicine cannot help me. Above us, I heard boots hitting the ground. Lots of them, shouting. Rex's barking suddenly cut off, and my heart clenched. If they hurt my dog. Search everything, a voice commanded. The asset crashed in this area. It's wounded and can't have gone far. Shoot to kill if necessary, but preferably we need it alive. Asset. They called him an asset, like he was equipment, property. The being's hand found mine in the darkness. His touch was growing colder. Listen, carefully. I do not have much time. Don't talk like that, I said, though I could see he was right. His breathing was getting shallower. Save your strength. No. You must know. You must understand. Before they find us. Understand what? His eyes locked onto mine, and suddenly the darkness of the cellar seemed to fall away. I was somewhere else, seeing through his eyes, experiencing his memories. And what I saw made my blood run cold. I saw Earth from space. I saw ships, dozens of them, hovering in orbit, invisible to human technology. I saw beings like him, watching, recording, documenting humanity's every move. And I saw something else, something that shook me to my core. I saw a man in ancient robes, teaching on a hillside, and beside him, invisible to the crowd, stood one of these beings. Jesus. They'd been watching Jesus. We have watched your species. For thousands of years, his voice echoed in my mind. But your Jesus, he was special. He was the one who changed everything. Above us, I heard soldiers entering my barn. Fan out! Check every corner. Use the thermal scanners. The being's grip on my hand tightened with surprising strength. What I am about to show you will challenge everything you believe, everything your church has taught you. I don't care about that right now, I said desperately. I care about keeping you alive. A sad smile seemed to cross his alien features. That is why I chose you, Daniel Carter. That is why you were the one who needed to hear this. The cellar door rattled above us. Someone was testing it. There's an old door here, sir. Looks like it leads underground. Time had just run out. Stand back, a voice commanded above us. I heard the distinctive sound of a weapon being readied. They were going to blast the door open. The being's hand pressed harder against my forehead, and suddenly the cellar disappeared entirely. I was standing on a hillside in ancient Judea. I knew it was ancient. I could feel it, could smell the dry earth and olive trees, could see the people in their simple robes gathering around a figure who stood on a large rock, teaching. Jesus. I recognized him from every painting I'd ever seen, but also not. This wasn't the ethereal, glowing figure from Sunday school pictures. This was a real man, dusty from travel, sweat on his brow, calluses on his hands. But his eyes, God, his eyes held something that made my chest ache. Compassion so deep it was almost painful to witness. Blessed are the peacemakers, he was saying in Aramaic, though somehow I understood every word, for they shall be called children of God. But I wasn't watching Jesus. The being's memory was focused on something else. Standing at the edge of the crowd, invisible to every human eye present, were three figures. Tall, luminescent, aliens. They were watching Jesus with an intensity that bordered on reverence. "We did not create him," the being's voice narrated in my mind. "That is the first thing you must understand. The birth, the life, the man, all of that was entirely natural, entirely human. We did not engineer your Savior." "Then what were you doing there?" I whispered into the vision. "We were protecting him, guiding him, ensuring that the message he carried survived long enough to change your world." The scene shifted. Now I was seeing Jesus in the Garden of Gethsemane, alone, praying in agony. But he wasn't alone. One of the beings stood nearby, and as I watched, it reached out and touched Jesus' shoulder. Jesus' head lifted. His eyes, wet with tears, seemed to see the being, really see it, and understanding passed between them. "I know what I must do," Jesus said aloud. "I know the path." "But Father, if there is another way—" "There is no other way," the being responded, and I somehow knew Jesus could hear it. "Your species learns through sacrifice, through love demonstrated at the highest cost. This is the only language that will penetrate their hearts deeply enough to change them." "And if they don't change?" Jesus asked. "If they take this message and twist it into something else? If they use my name to justify hate instead of love?" "Then he will return," the being said, "when the time is right, when they are ready to hear the full truth. We will tell them what you really taught, what you really meant." The vision shifted again, faster now. I saw the crucifixion, but from above, from the perspective of a ship hovering invisibly over Golgotha. I saw Jesus die, saw his body taken down, saw it placed in the tomb, and I saw what happened 3 days later. The stone rolled away, yes, but not by angels, by beings like the one dying in my cellar. They entered the tomb, and I watched as they placed their hands on Jesus' body. Light, brilliant and pure, flowed from them into him. Cellular regeneration on a scale that defied understanding. "You resurrected him," I breathed in horror and awe. "No," the being corrected. "We healed him." The resurrection was already happening. His spirit, his consciousness, was already returning from wherever it had gone. We simply repaired the vessel so it could contain that spirit again, so he could complete his mission. His mission? You mean the 40 days? Appearing to the disciples? More than that. So much more than what your Bible records. The vision showed me Jesus, alive again, standing with a group of these beings on a hilltop at night. They were teaching him, showing him images similar to what I was seeing now. The history of the universe, other civilizations, other worlds where beings had evolved and struggled with the same questions humanity faced. "You taught him," I said. "After his resurrection, you taught him the bigger picture." We showed him context, showed him that Earth was not alone, that the kingdom of heaven he spoke of was not some distant afterlife, but a level of consciousness, an evolution of the soul that many species across the cosmos were working toward. "But that's not what the church teaches," I protested. "The church teaches such as that Jesus is the only Son of God, that salvation comes only through him, and that is true." The being interrupted. "In a sense, but not in the way they've interpreted it. Jesus was teaching you how to evolve, how to transcend your violent, fearful nature and become something more. That evolution, that transcendence, that is salvation. Not from some eternal torture chamber, but from the hell you create for yourselves through hatred and division. The vision shifted one final time. I saw Jesus ascending. But he wasn't rising into clouds and angels. He was walking onto a ship, one of their ships. And he was smiling. "Where did you take him?" I demanded. Where he needed to go, where he still is, learning, growing, preparing. Preparing for what? For his return. When your species is ready to hear the full truth. Suddenly, the vision shattered. I was back in the cellar, the being's hand falling away from my forehead. Above us, I heard the cellar door being forced open. "Down there!" I see movement. The being looked at me with those enormous eyes, now dimming to almost nothing. "They cannot know that I told you. Promise me to..." "Daniel, promise you will. Keep this truth alive." "I promise," I whispered. He smiled, or something like a smile crossed his alien features. "Then I can die in peace." "No," I said desperately. "Don't you dare. Don't you..." Flashlight beams cut through the darkness as soldiers stormed down the stairs. 4 soldiers in black tactical gear surrounded us within seconds, red laser sights painting dots across my chest. Behind them, a woman in a military uniform descended the stairs with deliberate slowness, her cold gray eyes taking in the scene. "Step away from the asset," she commanded. Her voice was flat, emotionless. "Now." I raised my hand slowly, keeping my movements careful. The being, I still didn't know his name, had gone completely still. For a terrible moment I thought he was dead, but then I saw the faint rise and fall of his chest, still breathing, barely. "I'm stepping back," I said clearly. "Don't shoot." "I'm not armed." That was true. The shotgun was still upstairs in the barn where I'd dropped it. The woman moved past me, kneeling beside the being. She pulled out some kind of scanner, running it over his body. The device beeped rapidly, and she frowned. "He's dying," she said matter-of-factly. "Probably has less than an hour. Shame. Command wanted him alive." She stood and turned to face me, her expression hardening. "But we've got you, which is almost as valuable." "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I heard a crash, came to investigate, found that. I was about to call the sheriff when you showed up." She smiled, but there was no warmth in it. "Mr. Carter, Daniel, can I call you Daniel?" I didn't answer. "I'm Colonel Sarah Vance, United States Air Force Special Access Programs, and you're in a world of trouble. See? That being you're protecting? It's part of an ongoing national security operation that is classified at levels you don't even have words for. By harboring it, by preventing us from recovering it immediately, you've committed about 17 different federal crimes." "I didn't harbor anything," I protested. "I just found him here and..." "Him," she interrupted. "Interesting. Most people would say it. But you said him. That suggests communication. That suggests he told you something." My mouth went dry. "I don't know what you mean." "They communicate telepathically," Colonel Vance continued, circling me slowly like a shark. "Direct mind-to-mind contact. Very effective, also very dangerous, because we never know what kind of propaganda they're feeding civilians." Propaganda. I felt anger rising in my chest despite my fear. That thing is dying and you're calling it propaganda? That thing, she said coldly, is an enemy combatant from a species that has been observing Earth without permission for thousands of years. They're not our friends, Mr. Carter. They're not benevolent space brothers here to guide humanity. They're a threat to national security and global stability. That's not what... I stopped myself, but too late. Her eyes lit up. Not what he told you. Oh, this is good. What did he tell you, Daniel? What pretty lies did he put in your head? I clenched my jaw, saying nothing. Colonel Vance sighed and pulled out a syringe from a case on her belt. I really hoped we could do this the easy way. But the hard way works too. We've developed a very interesting pharmaceutical cocktail over the years. A truth serum, if you will, specifically designed to counter their mental conditioning. You can't do this, I said, backing against the stone wall. I'm an American citizen. I have rights. Rights! She laughed, the sound echoing in the cellar. Mr. Carter, you stopped having rights the moment you made contact with an extraterrestrial entity. As of right now, you're in federal custody under the Emergency Alien Contact Protocols. You have no right to an attorney, no right to a phone call, no right to anything except what I decide to give you. Two of the soldiers grabbed my arms, holding me still. I struggled, but they were too strong. Wait! I shouted desperately. Wait! I'll tell you. I'll tell you everything he said. Just don't... Oh, you'll tell me anyway, Colonel Vance said, moving closer with the syringe. But the drugs ensure you can't lie. Can't hold anything back. Even the things you don't consciously remember. The needle touched my arm. And then the being spoke, his voice exploding into all our minds at once with a force that made everyone in the cellar stagger. Enough. The soldiers dropped me, clutching their heads. Colonel Vance fell to her knees, the syringe clattering to the floor. Even I felt the force of it, like a thunderclap inside my skull. The being was sitting up now, and though his body was still broken, his eyes blazed with an intensity that seemed to fill the entire cellar with light. You want to know what I told him? His telepathic voice was different now, stronger, amplified, as if he was burning the last of his life force to be heard. I told him the truth about your Jesus Christ. Colonel Vance tried to speak, but the being's mental force held her silent. I told him that we were there when your Savior walked the earth, that we witnessed his miracles, his death, and his resurrection. Lies, Colonel Vance managed to gasp out. All lies. The being turned his fading eyes to her. You know, they are not lies. Colonel, you have seen the footage. You have read the reports from the recovery teams at the holy sites. Her face went pale. How do you know about that? We know everything. We have always known. And now, Daniel Carter will know, too. He turned his gaze back to me, and I felt that connection again, that direct mental link. But this time, instead of visions, I felt something else flowing into my mind. Knowledge. Pure information. Coordinates. Names. Locations. There is a facility, his voice echoed in my mind, beneath the Vatican, where they keep the proof, the recordings, the evidence that we were there, that we are real, that everything I've told you is true. Stop this! Colonel Vance screamed. Someone shut him down, now! One of the soldiers raised his weapon, but the being's next words froze everyone in place. If you kill me, the information goes public. We have prepared contingencies, dead man switches, in your digital systems. Everything we know about your government's lies will be released. Unless what? Colonel Vance demanded. The being's eyes dimmed further. His voice grew weaker. Unless you let him go. Let Daniel Carter walk free with what he knows. Let him share the truth. You're insane, she spat. We can't do that. We'll never do that. Then the world will know about all of it. The crashes, the contact, the treaties, the bases, the lies. Colonel Vance stood slowly, her face a mask of barely controlled rage. You're bluffing. The being smiled again, that strange alien expression that was somehow entirely human. You know, I'm not. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she pulled out a radio. Colonel Vance to command. We have a situation. For 15 minutes, Colonel Vance stood in that cellar, arguing in hushed, tense tones with whoever was on the other end of her radio. The soldiers kept their weapons trained on both me and the dying being, whose luminescence had faded to almost nothing. I could feel him weakening, feel his consciousness starting to slip away. But he held on somehow, waiting for the answer. Finally, Colonel Vance lowered the radio. Her expression was thunderous. Command has authorized a compromise. Which is, I asked, my voice hoarse. You walk. We don't arrest you, don't detain you, don't make you disappear. You go back to your normal life. In exchange for... Her jaw clenched. In exchange for your silence. You don't talk about what you saw here. Don't post it online. Don't tell your friends. Don't contact any media. You forget this ever happened, and we forget you were ever here. I looked at the being, whose enormous eyes met mine. Don't agree, his voice whispered in my mind. That's not the deal. No, I said aloud. That's not acceptable. Colonel Vance's hand moved to her sidearm. Excuse me. You said it was a compromise. But that's just you getting everything you want, and me getting threatened into silence. That's not a deal. You're not in a position to negotiate, she said coldly. But I am, the being's voice cut through the tension. Tell her what I want. Daniel. I swallowed hard, my heart pounding. He wants me to tell the truth. To share what he showed me. About Jesus. About everything. Absolutely not, Colonel Vance snapped. Then, the contingency activates. In 3, 2, wait! She held up a hand, then spoke into the radio again. Command, the asset is threatening to activate its dead man protocol. Yes, sir. Yes, I understand the implications. But, sir, she listened, her expression growing darker. Yes, sir. Understood. She lowered the radio and looked at me with undisguised hatred. Command has authorized a modified deal. You can tell your story. Post it online, tell your friends, do whatever you want. But we reserve the right to deny everything, discredit you, and ensure that anyone who matters thinks you're insane. You'll be laughed at, dismissed. At best, people will think you had a mental breakdown. At worst, they'll think you're a dangerous conspiracy theorist. But I'll be alive, I said, and I'll be free. For now, she said. But Mr. Carter, understand this. If your story gains too much traction, if it starts to actually threaten the stability of the systems we've built, if it causes real problems. She leaned in close, her breath cold on my face. There are ways to make people disappear that look like accidents. Heart attacks, car crashes, suicides. Brave man, the being's voice whispered in my mind, weaker now. You are a brave man. Daniel Carter. I'm not brave, I said quietly. I'm terrified. But I made him a promise. Colonel Vance straightened. Fine. The deal is made. You're free to go, but this conversation never happened. This facility, these soldiers, me, none of it exists. If you mention any of us by name, the deal is void and you disappear. Understand? I understand. Good. Get him out of here, she told the soldiers, and get a medical team down here. Maybe we can still salvage the asset. 2 soldiers grabbed my arms again, but this time they were guiding me, not restraining me. They led me up the stairs, through my barn, and out into the cool night air. The property was swarming with military vehicles and personnel. Floodlights illuminated everything like daylight. My house was being searched, every room torn apart. I saw Rex in a cage near one of the trucks, barking frantically. "What about my dog?" I demanded. "He'll be returned to you after we're done here," one of the soldiers said. "Go inside your house. Stay there. We'll be gone by dawn." They released me and walked away, leaving me standing in the middle of my own property, surrounded by armed soldiers and vehicles that officially didn't exist, having just made a deal with a government agency that would deny everything. I looked up at the sky, at the stars that suddenly seemed much more populated than I'd ever imagined. "Thank you," came a voice in my mind, so faint I almost missed it. "Thank you for keeping the promise." "Did you make it?" I thought, hoping he could still hear me. "Did they save you?" But there was only silence. I stood there for a long time, waiting for a response that never came. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the eastern sky, I watched the last of the military vehicles pull away, taking with them all evidence that anything unusual had happened, except for the scorch marks in the grass, except for the silvery blue blood still staining my root cellar floor, except for the memories burned into my brain, except for the truth. 3 days passed before they returned Rex. The dog was different, quieter, more nervous, jumping at shadows. I knew how he felt. My property had been sanitized. The scorch marks were gone. The root cellar had been cleaned so thoroughly it looked like it had been power washed. Even the damaged door to my barn had been repaired. It was as if that night had never happened. Except I knew it had. I tried to go back to normal, fed the cattle, fixed a fence line, went to church on Sunday, and sang the hymns I'd sung 1,000 times before. But everything felt different now. Wrong. Like I was living in a play, performing a role, saying lines I no longer believed. Pastor Jim preached about the resurrection that Sunday, about how Jesus had conquered death, how he'd risen on the 3rd day, how it was the foundation of our faith. He wasn't wrong, but he wasn't right either. The truth was so much more complex, so much stranger than anything Pastor Jim could imagine. I tried to focus on the sermon, but my mind kept drifting back to what the being had shown me. The visions of Jesus being healed by alien technology, the image of him walking onto a ship, the revelation that the kingdom of heaven wasn't a place but a state of consciousness. After the service, Pastor Jim pulled me aside. He was a good man, in his 60s, with kind eyes and a genuine heart. "Daniel, is everything all right? You seemed distracted during the service." "I'm fine, Pastor. Just tired." He studied my face. "Folks are saying they saw military vehicles at your place the other night. Everything okay?" "Of course they saw. Nothing stays secret in a small town." "Just some training exercise," I lied. "They needed to use the property for something. It was fine." "If you ever need to talk," he said, squeezing my shoulder, "my door is always open." I nodded, knowing I could never tell him. How could I? How could I tell this good, faithful man that everything he believed was true but incomplete? That the faith he'd devoted his life to was just one piece of a much larger puzzle? That night, I sat in my study with a bottle of whiskey and my laptop. I'd been putting this off for 3 days, terrified of what would happen if I actually went through with it. But I'd made a promise. I opened a new document and started typing. I saved a wounded alien from soldiers. His message about Jesus shook my faith. The words flowed easier than I expected. Everything the being had shown me, everything he'd told me, came pouring out onto the page. The crash, the hiding, the vision of Jesus being watched by aliens, the resurrection, the truth about what salvation really meant. When I finished, it was 3 a.m. and I had 25 pages. I read through it once, my hands shaking. This was insane. I was about to post something that would make me a laughingstock. That would destroy my reputation. That might even put my life in danger. But I'd promised. I thought about the being, dying in my root cellar, using the last of his strength to protect me. Thought about Jesus, teaching on that hillside 2,000 years ago, knowing he was heading toward crucifixion, but doing it anyway. Courage isn't the absence of fear. It's doing what's right despite the fear. I created a new YouTube account, set up a simple camera, and started recording. "My name is Daniel Carter," I said to the lens. "And 3 days ago, something impossible happened on my ranch in Montana. I found a wounded alien hiding in my barn, and what he told me about Jesus Christ will change everything you thought you knew about Christianity." I took a deep breath and continued. "Before I tell you what he showed me, I need you to understand something. I'm a Christian. I've been a believer my whole life. I go to church every Sunday. I pray. I read my Bible. But what this being revealed to me didn't destroy my faith. It deepened it. It made me realize that God is so much bigger, so much more magnificent than anything our human religions have taught us. And if you're ready to hear the truth, if you're ready to see your faith in a whole new light, then keep watching. Because what I'm about to share with you is going to challenge everything you believe." I talked for 2 hours, telling the entire story. When I finished, I uploaded the video without letting myself second guess. The title read, "I saved a wounded alien from soldiers. His message about Jesus shook my faith." I hit publish and waited for my life to fall apart. The video went live at 4:17 a.m. on a Tuesday morning. By noon, it had 50 views. By evening, 500. By the end of the week, 50,000. And then things got weird. The comments section exploded. Half the people called me a liar, a hoaxer, an attention seeker. Some were cruel, telling me to seek professional help. Others were more creative in their insults. But the other half were different. This resonates with something deep inside me, one comment read. I've always felt there was more to the story. My grandfather was in the Air Force, another said. Before he died, he told me they'd recovered something in the desert. Something they kept hidden. He never gave details, but this matches what he hinted at. I'm a pastor, and this doesn't threaten my faith, wrote someone else. It expands it. Thank you for your courage. But the comment that stopped me cold came from an account with no profile picture, no name, just a string of numbers. Daniel Carter, you were not the only one contacted that night. There are others, many others. We need to talk. Check your email. My hands trembled as I opened my inbox. There, from an encrypted email address, was a message with a simple subject line. You're not alone. The email read, Mr. Carter, my name is Dr. Elena Rodriguez. I'm a physicist working at MIT. 3 years ago, I had an experience similar to yours. I was shown things that changed my understanding of reality, of religion, of everything. I've been too afraid to speak publicly, but your video gave me courage. There are at least 40 others I know of who've been contacted. We've been communicating in secret, trying to understand what we were shown and why. Would you be willing to join us? We meet virtually every Thursday night. I stared at the email for a long time. Part of me wanted to ignore it, to pretend I'd done my duty by posting the video and could now return to my quiet life. But I knew that was impossible now. I replied, when and where? Within an hour, I had a link to an encrypted video conference. That Thursday, I logged in and found myself looking at 43 faces from all over the world. Young and old, different races, different nationalities, different backgrounds, but all with the same look in their eyes. The look of people who'd seen something that changed them forever. Dr. Rodriguez moderated the meeting. She was in her 50s, with graying hair and sharp, intelligent eyes. Welcome, Daniel, she said warmly. Everyone here has a story similar to yours. Some were contacted like you were. Others witnessed events they couldn't explain. A few worked in government programs and saw things they weren't supposed to see. But we all came to the same conclusion. Humanity's relationship with extraterrestrial intelligence goes back thousands of years, and it's deeply connected to our religious traditions. Especially Christianity, added a man who introduced himself as Father Michael Chen, a Catholic priest from San Francisco. The more I studied the ancient texts, the more I found evidence of non-human intervention. The angels in the Bible, many of their descriptions match what we would now call alien encounters. But why? I asked. Why would they be so involved in our religious development? Because, said an elderly woman named Margaret, who claimed to have worked for NASA in the 1970s, they're trying to help us evolve. Not physically, spiritually, consciously. They've been guiding us slowly, carefully, trying to help us reach a level of development where we can join the larger galactic community. And Jesus? I pressed. What about what I was shown? About them healing him. About the resurrection being aided by their technology. The room fell silent. Then Father Chen spoke. I've struggled with that myself. But I've come to understand something. A miracle doesn't stop being a miracle just because we understand the mechanism. If God created these beings, if He works through them to achieve His purposes, then their technology is simply another tool of divine will. That's what I was shown, I said quietly. That the divine and the scientific aren't opposites, that they're the same thing viewed from different angles. Dr. Rodriguez nodded. Exactly. And that's the message they seem desperate for us to understand before it's too late. Too late for what? I asked, though I suspected I knew the answer. Before we destroy ourselves, Margaret said bluntly. Every contactee I've spoken to received the same warning. Humanity is at a crossroads. The next few decades will determine whether we evolve or go extinct. Climate collapse, nuclear war, artificial intelligence run amok. We're facing multiple existential threats simultaneously. And they can't just save us, I said, remembering what the being in my cellar had implied. No, Dr. Rodriguez confirmed. There seem to be rules. Laws of non-interference or something like it. They can guide, suggest, hint, even occasionally intervene in small ways. But the choice has to be ours. Free will is apparently sacred, even to them. So what do we do? I asked. Why bring us together? To be a chorus, Father Chen said. One voice crying in the wilderness gets dismissed as crazy. But 40 voices, 50, 100? Eventually people start to listen, start to question, start to open their minds to possibilities they'd dismissed before. And that's when real change becomes possible, Dr. Rodriguez finished. We talked for 3 more hours, comparing experiences, sharing details of what we'd been shown, slowly piecing together a larger picture of humanity's true history and our place in the cosmos. By the time we logged off, I felt something I hadn't felt since that night in the cellar. Hope. Not naive hope, not ignorant optimism, but genuine hope born from the knowledge that I wasn't alone, that others were fighting the same fight, carrying the same burden. The next day, I posted a follow-up video. I've been contacted by others who've experienced what I experienced, I told the camera. And I want you to know, if you've seen something you can't explain, if you've had an encounter that changed your understanding of reality, you're not crazy, you're not alone, and your story matters. Within 24 hours, my email inbox was flooded with messages, hundreds of people sharing their own experiences, their own encounters, their own revelations. The chorus was growing. The backlash started exactly 2 weeks after my first video went viral. It began with a local news story. Montana rancher claims alien encounter, mental health experts concerned. They interviewed my neighbors, my friends from church, even my ex-wife. Daniel's been under a lot of stress, my ex-wife Jennifer told the camera. His father's death hit him hard. I think he's having some kind of breakdown and needs help. Pastor Jim was more diplomatic, but no less damaging. Daniel Carter is a good man, but I'm concerned he may have been deceived by dark forces masquerading as enlightenment. The Bible warns us about false prophets and lying wonders. Then came the professional debunkers. A popular skeptic YouTuber devoted an entire video to destroying my story, pointing out inconsistencies, questioning why I had no physical evidence, suggesting I'd created the whole thing for attention or money. Notice how he never shows the alien, the skeptic said mockingly. Never shows the blood he claims was in his cellar? It's always just his word. And conveniently, the military cleaned everything up. How convenient for Mr. Carter's unprovable story. The attacks got more personal. Someone dug up my divorce records and posted them online, suggesting my failed marriage proved I was unstable. Another found my DUI from 15 years ago and used it to paint me as unreliable. My ranch started getting visitors, not the friendly kind. People would drive by slowly, taking pictures. Some would stop and try to get onto my property. One group came at night with cameras and metal detectors, convinced they'd find evidence I'd hidden. I had to call the sheriff 3 times in 1 week. But the worst came from the church. Pastor Jim called me into his office on a Sunday morning before service. His face was grave. "Daniel, we need to talk about your activities." "My activities?" "These videos, these claims you're making. Several members of the congregation have expressed concern. They feel you're leading people astray, mixing Christianity with New Age beliefs and pseudoscience." "I'm not mixing anything," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "I'm telling the truth about what happened to me, about what I was shown." "Daniel, I've known you for 20 years. I believe that you believe what you're saying. But belief doesn't make something true. The enemy is clever. He can create convincing visions, make lies feel like revelations. You think Satan showed me those things? I think you had an experience you can't explain, and in your grief and confusion, you interpreted it in a way that contradicts Scripture. And now you're spreading that interpretation to others, potentially damaging their faith. "Or expanding it," I countered. "Pastor, what if the truth is bigger than what we've been taught? What if God is working in ways we never imagined?" He sighed, looking genuinely sad. "Daniel, the Leadership Council met last night. They've asked me to deliver a message. Until you publicly recant these claims and seek counseling, you're not welcome to participate in church activities or take communion." The words hit me like a physical blow. "You're excommunicating me? We prefer to call it loving discipline. We're praying that time away will help you see clearly again." I stood up, my hands shaking. 20 years, Jim. 20 years I've been part of this church. I've taught Sunday school. I've served on committees. I've donated my time and money. And now, because I'm telling a truth that makes you uncomfortable, you're throwing me out? We're not throwing you out. You're welcome to attend services as a visitor, but until you repent. Repent? I laughed bitterly. Repent for telling the truth? For honoring a promise I made to a dying being who showed me the reality of God's love? That being was a demon, Daniel. I truly believe that. I looked at him for a long moment. This man I'd respected and trusted for 2 decades. And I saw that he genuinely believed what he was saying. He thought he was protecting his flock from a wolf in sheep's clothing. "I'm sorry you feel that way, Pastor. But I can't lie. I can't pretend I didn't see what I saw, didn't learn what I learned. If that means I'm not welcome here anymore, then I guess that's how it has to be." I walked out of his office, through the church I'd called home for 20 years, and out into the parking lot where other members were arriving for service. Some looked at me with pity, others with suspicion, a few with outright hostility. But one woman, elderly Mrs. Patterson, who I'd helped with her groceries every week for years, caught my eye. She walked over, squeezed my hand, and whispered, "I believe you. And I'm not the only one." She slipped a piece of paper into my palm and walked away. I looked down at it. An email address and a simple note. "There are 11 of us from the church who want to hear more. We meet Tuesdays." As I drove away from the church for what I suspected might be the last time, I felt a strange mix of grief and liberation. I'd lost something precious, but I'd gained something more important. Truth, and the courage to stand by it, no matter the cost. The Tuesday meeting was held in Mrs. Patterson's living room. 11 people from my former church, ranging from college age to retirement, sitting in a circle, looking at me with a mixture of hope and fear. "Thank you for coming," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "I know this isn't easy. I know what it cost you to reach out to me." Pastor Jim wouldn't approve, said Tom Henderson, a deacon who'd been with the church for 30 years. But I can't shake the feeling that you're telling the truth, Daniel. And if you are, well, we need to understand what it means. I spent the next 2 hours telling them everything in detail. Not the sanitized version from my videos, but the raw, unfiltered experience. The fear I'd felt, the doubt, the awe, the way it had shaken my faith to its foundations before rebuilding it into something stronger. When I finished, the room was silent for a long moment. Then Sarah Mitchell, a young mother of 3, spoke up. If what you're saying is true, if Jesus really did receive help from aliens, if the resurrection happened but not exactly the way we've been taught, does that make him less divine, less worthy of worship? That's what I've been wrestling with, I admitted. And here's what I've come to understand. Jesus never asked to be worshipped. He asked to be followed, to be emulated. Love one another as I have loved you, not worship me as God. But he is God, Tom protested. The Son of God, part of the Trinity. Is he? I interrupted gently. Or is that something the church decided 300 years after his death? What if Jesus was fully human, but connected to the divine in a way that showed us what we're all capable of becoming? Father Chen had explained this to me during one of our online meetings. The Trinity doctrine wasn't established until the Council of Nicaea in 325 AD. Before that, there were many different interpretations of Jesus' nature. What if the interpretation that won wasn't the most accurate, but simply the most politically useful? Mrs. Patterson spoke up, her voice quiet but firm. I'm 83 years old. I've been a Christian since I was 6. And you know what? This makes more sense to me than anything I've been taught. God is infinite, right? Eternal? Creator of the entire universe? Why would such a being limit himself to one small planet? Why wouldn't he be working throughout the cosmos, using whatever tools and helpers he needs? Like angels, Sarah said slowly. We've always believed in angels. Messengers of God. What if these beings you met, what if they're what angels actually are? The thought hit me like lightning. Of course. The descriptions in the Bible of angels, beings of light, descending from the sky, inspiring fear and awe. What if those weren't metaphors or visions, but actual encounters with extraterrestrial beings working on behalf of the divine? The angel that appeared to Mary, I said, working through it out loud. The angels at the tomb after the resurrection. The beings that appeared to the shepherds. What if they were all the same species as the one you saved? Tom finished, his eyes wide. My God, it all fits. But why hide it? Sarah asked. If God has been working with aliens all along, why let us think we're alone in the universe? Because we weren't ready, I said, remembering the dying being's words. Because the truth is so big, so overwhelming, that it would have shattered early human civilizations. They needed simple stories, clear rules, a faith they could understand and hold on to. But now? Mrs. Patterson asked. Now we're running out of time. Now we need to understand the full truth if we're going to survive what's coming. I pulled out my laptop and showed them something I'd discovered the week before. Satellite images of Earth from space, showing the extent of environmental damage, statistics on nuclear weapons, projections of resource depletion and climate collapse. The being showed me 2 possible futures, I told them. One where humanity evolves, grows up, joins the larger cosmic community, and one where we destroy ourselves completely. He said the window for choosing is closing. How long do we have? Tom asked. Maybe 50 years, maybe less. It depends on the choices we make right now, in this moment. The room fell silent again as the weight of that settled over us. Finally, Sarah spoke. So what do we do? How do we help humanity make the right choice? We tell the truth, I said simply. We share what we know. We help people expand their understanding of God, of the universe, of our place in it. We stop fighting over whose religion is right and start recognizing that every faith tradition has been trying to describe the same infinite reality from different angles. Pastor Jim will say we're heretics, Tom said quietly. Probably, I agreed. Jesus was called a heretic too, didn't make him wrong. Mrs. Patterson stood up, her old bones creaking. I've spent 60 years in that church, raised my children there, buried my husband from there. But if I have to choose between comfortable lies and uncomfortable truth, I choose truth. One by one, the others nodded. So we're really doing this? Sarah asked, looking around at the group. We're really going to start our own, what? Church? Study group? We're going to be truth tellers, I said, however that looks. And we're going to trust that others will join us, that the seeds we plant will grow. Tom pulled out his phone. I'm recording this. With your permission, I'd like to start my own YouTube channel. Share these conversations. Let people see that it's not just you, Daniel, that others are asking these questions too. The more voices, the better, I agreed. As the meeting broke up and people filed out, Mrs. Patterson pulled me aside. My grandson works at NASA, she said quietly. He called me last week, said something strange is happening. More sightings, more encounters. The government is scrambling to control the narrative, but it's getting harder. He thinks disclosure is coming whether they want it or not. How soon? She looked at me with those wise, ancient eyes. He thinks we have maybe 5 years before they can't hide it anymore. Before the truth comes out, whether we're ready or not. 5 years. 5 years to prepare humanity for the biggest revelation in history. 5 years to expand enough minds so that when the truth finally came out, it wouldn't destroy civilization. No pressure. 6 months after that Tuesday night meeting, everything changed. It started with the lights. Strange lights in the sky, seen by thousands of people across 6 continents. Not the usual UFO reports that could be dismissed as weather balloons or aircraft. These were massive, unmistakable, hovering over major cities for hours at a time. New York, London, Tokyo, Sydney, Moscow, Mexico City. The government tried to explain them away. Weather phenomena, mass hallucinations, hoaxes. But the evidence was overwhelming. Hundreds of videos from different angles. Military pilots confirming the objects on radar. Witnesses from every walk of life. The truth was becoming impossible to deny. I watched the news coverage from my living room, my heart pounding. This was it. This was what the being had told me about. The veil thinning. The preparation for first contact. My phone rang. It was Dr. Rodriguez. Are you seeing this? She asked breathlessly. Everyone's seeing this, I said. Daniel, I just got word from one of our contacts in the military. They're preparing for something. Something big. There's going to be an announcement. When? Soon. Maybe days. The president is being briefed right now. I sat down heavily, my legs suddenly weak. We're not ready. Humanity isn't ready for this. We're never going to be ready, she said. But maybe that's not the point. Maybe the point is that it's happening anyway, and we have to deal with it. 3 days later, the president addressed the nation. I'll never forget watching that broadcast. The president looked tired, older than usual, as he sat behind the resolute desk in the Oval Office. My fellow Americans and citizens of the world, I come before you tonight to confirm what many of you have already suspected. We are not alone in the universe. For decades, our government has known about the existence of non-human intelligence. We have recovered their technology, communicated with them, and learned from them. This secret has been kept for what were believed to be valid national security reasons. But the time for secrecy has ended. The world stopped. The president continued, his voice steady but somber. In 72 hours, representatives from an extraterrestrial civilization will land publicly at the United Nations. They come in peace with a message they say humanity needs to hear, a message about our past, our present, and our future. I urge all citizens to remain calm, to approach this historic moment with open minds and hearts, and to remember that we are all in this together. The broadcast ended. For a moment, the world held its breath. Then chaos erupted. Riots in some cities, prayer vigils in others, stock markets crashed. Religious leaders issued conflicting statements. Some said it was the end times. Others said it was a new beginning. My phone exploded with messages. The Tuesday night group, the online network of contactees, news organizations wanting interviews. But I ignored all of it. Because in the midst of the chaos, I received one message that stopped me cold. It was from an unknown number. Just 3 words. Thank you, Daniel. I stared at that message for a long time. The being from my barn. He was alive, or others like him. And they remembered. 72 hours later, the world watched as 3 ships descended over the United Nations building in New York. Not like the movies. No dramatic beams of light or alien music. Just 3 craft, elegant and silent, landing on the lawn as cameras from every nation captured the moment. The doors opened. Beings emerged, tall, luminescent, moving with a grace that was both alien and somehow familiar. And walking with them, surrounded by them but clearly distinct, was a figure in simple robes. Even from the grainy news footage, even with the distance and the chaos, I knew who it was. The reporters were shouting questions. The crowd was in an uproar. World leaders were trying to maintain order. But all I could see was him. The man from the visions. The teacher from 2,000 years ago. The savior whose true story had been hidden and twisted and simplified for generations. Jesus had returned. Not with trumpets and judgment, not with fire and brimstone, but exactly as he'd promised the being would tell me, to help humanity through what comes next. The broadcast continued as he approached the podium. The UN Secretary General, looking shell-shocked, stepped aside. Jesus, Yeshua, looked out at the assembled crowd, at the cameras broadcasting to billions around the world, and smiled. That same sad, warm smile from the visions. When he spoke, his voice was amplified not just by the microphones, but by something else. Something that resonated in every heart, in every mind, in every soul watching. "My friends," he said, in perfect English that somehow everyone heard in their own language, "I have returned not to judge, but to reveal. Not to condemn, but to guide. For 2,000 years, you have carried fragments of truth. Today I give you the whole picture." He gestured to the beings standing with him. "These are my friends, my teachers, my companions since before your recorded history began. They have watched over humanity, guided you, protected you, waiting for the day when you were ready to understand your true place in the cosmos." The crowd was silent now. The entire world was listening. "I came to you before as a man, to show you what humanity could become. I taught you love, compassion, sacrifice, hope. But I could not tell you everything. You were not ready. The full truth would have broken you." He paused, his eyes sweeping across the crowd with infinite compassion. "But now, you stand at a crossroads. The choices you make in the coming years will determine whether your species survives or joins the countless others who destroyed themselves when they reached this level of development. You face climate collapse, nuclear annihilation, technological singularity. These are the tests that every civilization must pass. And I have returned to tell you that you can pass them. That you have everything within you needed to evolve beyond your current limitations. That the kingdom of heaven I spoke of is not a distant afterlife, but a state of consciousness you can achieve here, now, together. The beings with me have offered to guide you, to share their knowledge, to help you navigate the challenges ahead. But the choice must be yours. Free will is sacred, always has been, always will be." He looked directly at the camera, and for a moment, I felt like he was looking directly at me. "To those who prepared the way, who told the truth despite the cost, who kept the faith when others doubted, thank you. Your courage made this moment possible. My vision blurred with tears. And to all of humanity, the era of childhood is over. It is time to grow up. Time to take your place among the stars. Time to become what you were always meant to be. Will you rise to meet this moment? Will you choose love over fear, unity over division, hope over despair? The choice, as it has always been, is yours." He smiled again, and the whole world felt it. "But know this, you do not walk alone. You have never been alone, and you never will be." The broadcast continued, but I'd heard enough. I walked outside into the Montana night, looked up at the stars that suddenly seemed so much closer, and whispered into the darkness, "We'll try. God help us. We'll try." And from somewhere in the vastness of space, I felt a response, a warmth, a presence, a promise. "I know you will." And that's enough. 6 months later, I sat on my porch with Rex at my feet, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. My ranch was quiet again. The reporters had moved on to other stories. The world was still processing, still adjusting, still struggling with the magnitude of what had been revealed. But change was happening. Real change. Nations were cooperating in ways they never had before. Technologies were being shared, resources redistributed. The beings, the Watchers as they called themselves, were teaching us things that could solve our environmental crisis, end hunger, cure diseases. It wasn't perfect. There was still resistance, still fear, still those who refused to accept the new reality. But the tide had turned. Humanity had chosen to grow up. My phone buzzed. A message from Sarah Mitchell from the Tuesday night group. Meeting tonight. We're discussing how to integrate the new teachings with traditional Christianity. Would love your perspective. I smiled. The work was never done. Would never be done. But that was okay. I thought about the being I'd saved in my barn, about the promise I'd made to him, about how one small act of compassion had rippled out into something larger than I ever could have imagined. And I thought about Jesus' words, "Whatever you did for the least of these, you did for me." Maybe that was the whole point. Maybe that's what it had always been about. Seeing the divine in the stranger, offering mercy to the wounded, keeping promises even when it cost you everything. I stood up, stretched, and headed inside to join the video call. The future was uncertain. The challenges were immense. But for the first time in my life, I felt genuine hope that humanity might actually make it. Because we were no longer alone. We never had been. And now, finally, we knew it.